So this episode is going to be, I think, very personable for the two of us.
Yeah.
Because this deeply has affected our entire life. I do want to start this episode off with something that I feel needs to be said.
Okay.
And a lot of people listening
Scared.
might not agree. I think society has developed an obsession with labeling people as either neurotypical or neurodivergent.
Yes.
And as an executive function coach, I can't even begin to tell you how much I hate those terminologies more than anything, because what it does is I think that it gives the medical field this addiction to pigeonhole people into false binaries and categorize them and label them and those that don't conform to societal standards. And then people praise neurotypical because they can sit behind a desk, they can perform the trivial menial tasks. And in my opinion, those are the ones that become enslaved to this broken down system of school, and they sacrifice their authenticity, their identity, their creativity, and then they shame the neurodivergent group because they're told to sit behind a desk all day, don't do this, calm down, don't speak. And it takes away from their own unique cerebral horsepower, and it gaslights them into thinking they're not good enough.
Wow.
That to me is
That was a lot.
That to me is my biggest issue with, I think, what I do in my field, and I would love your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, for everyone listening, we are going to be talking about ADHD today.
Yes, we are talking about ADHD.
I think we should probably preface that beforehand. Yes, school systems.
It's the school system.
Systems are interesting because they're not set up for any child to succeed or thrive, especially a child who struggles with executive functioning or a diagnosis of ADHD or an undiagnosis of ADHD, right? That whole didactic lecture style does not work well for a majority of students, and especially a child who struggles with their executive functioning. I mean, being able to sit there and pay attention and listen to a teacher lecture when you're not really interested in something can be insanely difficult.
It's excruciatingly painful for those with ADHD.
They can't do it.
Correct. And I also just want to say this. I think most people, when they hear ADHD, you automatically get attention deficit hyperactive disorder. I don't think that it is a attention deficit disorder. I think it's more of a attention regulation disorder.
I love that.
You like that?
I was going to mention that.
Yes.
It's not that we don't have an ability to focus. It's that we have an inability to focus on what we need to.
And that things that typically don't serve us or create novelty or excitement, those with ADHD are not going to engage in at all whatsoever under any means. Like, I know you have ADHD, right?
I do, and I will definitely get into
So, I mean, I'll get into this right now. I have raging ADHD, okay? And it's what got me in the field that I am today, which honestly means that I am quite brilliant. I have the ability to hyperfocus. I have photographic memory. I was telling you before, I can create a Lego set with 2,000 pieces in a matter of an hour or two.
Yeah.
But as gifted as I am, it's a serious curse, because if you ask me to pay a bill on time, or you ask me to sit behind a desk and do clerical work, there is nothing in this world that will get me to be able to do those mundane tasks in life at all. I can't even pay my taxes on time.
Yeah. Well, I think let's break it down, just because it's important for people to understand, the dynamic of ADHD.
Why don't you start with the executive deficits? Is that fair?
Well, I wanted to start with the different components, because there's three different elements of ADHD. So you could have the hyperactivity, just solely the hyperactivity,
Correct.
where that's fidgeting, blurting out, inability to sit still. That is like the textbook of ADHD, which I find, which we'll talk about later, is a huge misconception of what this disorder looks like. Because many people look to ADHD as that kid who is flailing around in the back of the classroom, can't sit still, keeps saying, Miss Smith, can't raise his hand no matter how many times you're asking him to raise his hand and not call out. That is what people view as a child with ADHD.
Correct.
Oftentimes, the children who have the inattentive component of it, which would be distractibility, emotional dysregulation, daydreaming, heightened sensitivities,
That was me.
all of these, perfectionism, all of these sorts of components are internalized.
Right.
So they're not going to be shown through fidgeting. They're not going to be shown through blurting out. And these are often the people that go undiagnosed. And we'll get into that in a second. And then you could have a combined of both, like of hyperactivity, where you can't sit still, you're constantly on go, 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 along with the inattentiveness, inability to pay attention, focus, distractibility, all of those.
That would be more along the lines of the executive deficits, correct?
Well, they all have a form of executive deficit.
No,
so
and I understand that.
as a whole. But what we were talking about with the different components, it's important to break down now the gender differences.
Can I just say something before that?
Yeah.
So you see how you broke it down into 3 components? It's
Yeah.
interesting because we've never had this conversation ever before.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
This is in the
and
DSM-5. This is how they diagnose.
So the way that I have 3 components that I look at, which
Okay.
is weird. And again, like you come at it from a psychological standpoint, I come at it from an executive function standpoint. I look at things cognitively, which would be the actual executive deficits. So you have the time management, the planning, the organization, things like that. Then you have the emotional dysregulation for me, which would then be the deregulated nervous system, anxiety, fear, and then you have the existential crisis. And again, this is my criteria, right? So the existential crisis would then be the feeling of not belonging, the feeling of not feeling in, and the feeling of being misunderstood. So it's funny that you go through the, your 3 main protocols, and then there's like not a difference. It's just that I go through my own, but we get to the same place regardless.
Yes. Yeah. And the main reason why I brought this up was because I want us to differentiate between what it looks like in boys and girls.
Super important.
And how this disorder came to be. And very interesting. In the 1970s, when this disorder was being looked at, and by the way, ADHD is one of the most highly researched mental health disorders on with medication as a whole. But at the time in the 1970s, they were only looking at boys and hyperactivity. So it became labeled as a boys disorder.
Yes.
This is what ADHD looked like. The blurting out, the inability to sit still, the hyperactivity of it all. So at this time, the inattentive part of this was really under the radar. And most of the time with girls, they show that inattentive side. So they are daydreaming, they're distracted, they are externalizing their problems, they are disorganized, they don't really know how to perfect their work, and they turn inwards where it's very shameful, and they feel guilty, they're embarrassed. So, and we'll get into that, but most girls are highly underdiagnosed, and it takes either something very detrimental, whether it be socially or work or school, to impact them to a degree that now it's being recognized. However, most of the time it's misdiagnosed as a mood disorder.
Yes. Also,
so you'll see anxiety or depression be the leading diagnosis, and ADHD not looked at.
I just want to tap into something super quick. And it's going literally just branched off of what you just said. It's funny being in my line of work now, where I do a lot of parental coaching, and you have this lost generation of older women that are undiagnosed for years, that recently just got diagnosed in their 40s and early 50s, that are now going, oh, I see now where my child gets it from. My entire life, I just felt disorganized. I felt like I had anxiety. I was told I had depression, like you just said. So you have this lost generation of women that had no idea what was going on internally, that struggled with this battle silently, that's now coming to light. So I just wanted to unpack that quickly.
100%. And also it's worth noting that ADHD can manifest and is oftentimes comorbid and co-occurring with depression and anxiety
100%.
Because the more that you have an inability to perform a task, to be able to organize, to be able to time manage appropriately, you're going to look at yourself of, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? So you develop anxiety or depression due to the inability to be able to execute these tasks, which again, we'll touch on.
There's so many things I want to say to that, but I'm not going to get into that now because you know where I'm going to go with that.
Right.
So I'm going to let you unpack what you want to unpack first, because if I get you derailed right now, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So basically, it's always misinterpreted. Not always, but it can be misinterpreted as a mood disorder or anxiety, like we're speaking on. And this really puts people in a box. And when you're undiagnosed, the outcomes for women are awful.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Especially, there is a high rate of self-harm. There's, like I just said, a high rate of depression.
There's a high rate of autoimmune disease also from their depression.
And eating disorders.
Oh, big time. Big time.
So all of these other disorders or characteristics can manifest through the undiagnosis and recognition of ADHD.
Right. 100%.
And of course, now we could get into like what that looks like. But, you know, really important. And with men, it was often seen as ADHD can be outgrown, because when boys go through puberty, oftentimes they start to be able to regulate a little bit better.
Correct.
Whereas women, when they hit puberty and, you know, their period and hormones and all of these different things, the emotions get very heightened.
Well, again,
and
so that's the difference.
And it comes out.
The
more.
men being more the external and the female being more the internal.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important to say.
Yeah. So as someone who was diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah, you were.
I am like, the epitome of it. But I think that, you know, I could segue into kind of my struggle with it and what it looks like, because for all of my life, I had a really hard time being able to organize, being able to initiate a task. I have task paralysis, where I could want to so badly start something, and I'll sit at my desk for like 8 hours and I just won't even know how to begin, where to start. And I get this overwhelming sense of anxiety because I don't know how to begin.
Right.
And this can feel very defeating and, you know, make a person feel what I felt is very dumb and very, you know, uneducated. And no matter how much I have tried to learn and understand something, to be able to execute that task, I'll have to go through this repetition over and over again to even be able to get done something that could take the average person probably 30 minutes to an hour. So locking in, I guess you could say, is difficult when it's a mundane, boring task that you really don't want to engage with. And time blindness is really huge too, which was something that I've struggled with. Underestimating the amount of time it takes to get a task done or get somewhere.
So just branching off of that quick, there is a saying that people with ADHD, ADD live in 2 different time zones.
Yeah.
Now or not now.
Yeah.
Like there is no in between. There's no in between. You can't conceptualize time, period. It's probably why you're always so late to coming to this podcast, but that's neither here nor there. So continue. Yeah.
And it's a constant struggle to be able to estimate the amount of time it's going to take to get something done, right? Be able to determine what do I need to do to get through my day to be able to make it to this meeting or appointment on time. The planning. The time management of understanding a priority. And with ADHD, it's the executive functioning part of your brain. So think of it as like a CEO. They're the CEO. They're running the show, right? It's planning. It's executing. It's initiating. It's time management. It's
organization.
Working memory, organization.
Processing.
All of this. So when these all are kind of broken down, and when you find that it's such a struggle to even complete something so simple as like planning your week or your day or remembering, you know, your friend's birthday, all of these tasks become very overwhelming. But if somebody asked you to remember something from 10 years ago on the exact day of what you were wearing, you'd probably remember that immediately. Exactly. Yeah. So for me, I just remember feeling a sense of discouragement. Mm-hmm. I felt very ashamed and, you know, everything just felt like a go, 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 but I don't know where to stop.
Right.
And I don't know where to start, but I'm just on this hamster wheel in my mind. And it's the inability of being able to really properly execute anything. And it starts to have you question, like, everyone else can do this around me, but
Right.
I can't. So
It's that
what's
state of
wrong with
comparison.
me? Or I could do it once, but then I can't do it again. And it can be really emotionally draining. And this is where I say that for women, especially, you go inwards because all of this shame of being unable to perform a task in a timely manner, in a way that you feel it should be executed, really does affect you. Even with, and we talk about this all the time, the podcast. I'll know what I want to say. I'll have everything structured. But the second I'm in this like pressured time and you go black. You go blank. Whereas if I'm in this like laid back, casual,
You're more in that flow
environment, you're more in a flow state. So
Can I say something? Otherwise,
Yeah.
my ADHD is going to kick in, and I'm
Of
gonna
course,
completely-
go.
I'm going to forget. What I feel like you're speaking on is I feel like those male and female
yes.
people with ADHD, they struggle with a large sense of aimlessness in the present and a sense of hopelessness for the future. And it's this difficulty in conceptualizing the what could be if I finish this, or what's going to happen if I don't finish this. And that fear of the unknown and the unpredictability of what's going to happen or what's not going to happen, I feel like that in and of itself is what elicits a lot of the anxiety that winds up happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you start to develop this sense of perfectionism where you
Correct.
feel like if you're not doing it, it's very black or white. It's all or nothing approach. It's like if I can't do this to my best ability, I'm a failure. Like
Right.
I don't know how to do this. And the most important thing about ADHD is the executive dysfunction. You know what needs to be done. You just don't know how to do it. So you start to get into this constant loop of shame,
Yeah.
of guilt, of self-blame, and you really start to believe that you're incapable of doing something.
It's almost like a self-infliction, learned helplessness.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And it's such a challenge. And something I want to mention that you talked about before is hyper focus. So with ADHD, like we said, it's not the inability to focus, it's the inability to be able to focus on tasks that we need to get done, especially when they're not interesting to us.
Correct.
So ADHD, norepinephrine, and dopamine are the two neurotransmitters that are involved and that have lower levels within our prefrontal cortex.
Correct.
So this is a neurodevelopmental disorder, a condition. So with this, dopamine is the reward system and the motivation, right? So this keeps us going on a task. This allows for us to remain at it. Even if we don't want to, we're still just going to do it.
Correct.
Right? The typical person will have enough dopamine to be able to produce and complete
Through the
that.
mundane tasks. Correct.
Through the mundane tasks. Norepinephrine, what that does is that sustains our
Correct.
focus and our ability to
Correct.
keep attention. With people with ADHD, in my head, I'll be sitting down, I'm looking at a book. I have to read this book. I read the first line, and then my brain goes, what am I going to eat for dinner today? Oh my gosh, did I remember to send that email? Oh my gosh, wait, I think my cat's sleeping. Let me check.
100%.
So
and then when you go check on the cat.
and then I go check. And then I'm gone. Time blindness.
Yep.
I lose track of time. All of a sudden, 2 hours pass. I've read one sentence of the book that I need to read and complete
Correct.
for work, my assignment, or whatever the case may be. So it's this inability to remain focused on a task that isn't kind of hitting these neurotransmitters.
Right.
However, when we are getting that dopamine rush from something we like, so most of the time people with ADHD are great in their occupational field that they find interest in.
Correct.
When you don't have that and you're doing just mundane, repetitive tasks for school, for work, it's so hard to remain focused, and your brain, there's like a blockage, like you can't. And it takes you so much longer to execute that task because you're not focused. Your brain's so much noise.
There's no dopaminergic reward to it. There's no novelty. There's no excitement. There's nothing that elicits the ability for us to want to engage.
Right.
And that's the problem.
And it's not underperforming, it's understimulated.
Correct.
So that's what this all is. So, you know, yes, people will look at a child and say, well, he's laser focused on video games the whole entire time.
Dopamine.
They're laser focused on their phone and scrolling through social media. That is all pleasure seeking.
Correct.
That's stimulating. All of these tasks are hitting that transmitter. But when you're asked to sit down and have to do a paper or stay focused and be in a classroom or be at work at a desk, your mind's running in 50 different places.
ADHD is kicking in for a second. It's also why, and I don't know why my head just went here, it's also why a lot of addicts or a lot of people with ADHD become addicts.
Oh.
A lot of people. Not,
oh, my gosh.
And I want to show discernment. Not every individual with ADHD becomes an addict, but a lot of those with ADHD who have a lot of deep-seated, unhealed, unresolved issues, because they're constantly seeking that external dopaminergic reward, that external hit of dopamine, they wind up engaging in addictive-like behaviors because it stimulates the same reward system. That, i.e., video game, doom scrolling through Instagram, food, for example, things like that.
Well, that's why impulsivity is huge with ADHD, and one that I was a victim of was impulsive shopping. I would spend thousands of dollars and click, click, click at shopping because that would make me feel good and I would get that dopamine hit. You don't think about the bill that's going to come in 2 months from now.
You live in now or not now.
Yeah.
That hit your now button.
Yep. It's that impulse of needing it. And it's really challenging to control it in that moment, especially because, you know, this condition is novelty seeking.
Correct.
You know, like you're saying. So there's so many hidden challenges to it that I feel aren't really talked about. And emotional sensitivity as well is something that's neglected.
I wanted to get into this so bad when you were talking before.
Yeah.
So like a lot of individuals with ADHD, and I don't know if this is where you were going, but this is definitely something that I wanted to tap into heavily.
Yeah.
A lot of individuals with ADHD, they suffer from a lot of sensory processing. And whether it's RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, whether it's injustice sensitivity or sensory overreactivity, it's all one and the same. It's a hyperfixation and hypervigilant response to the external environment and to inputs from those around you, whether it's going to be facial expressions, body language, tonality, even if they're subtle and neutral. These types of things feel like an absolute stab to the heart and a swift kick to the nuts. And it also has us in this constant state of hypervigilance where we're constantly seeking the worst thing to happen. And then when it happens, it fits the script of what we were already concocting in our own head. And I think a lot of it ties back to, and then I'm going to let you cut me off, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I think a lot of it ties back to what you were saying when we developed that inability to feel that we're good enough, to feel that we can accomplish these small, trivial, menial tasks, to feel that we can do A, B, and C, and then developing this sense of self-wallowing and self-loathing mechanisms and these coping mechanisms and feeling like we can't conduct ourselves like everybody else. It leads to this.
Well, because you don't at the time know what's wrong with you. You don't have the modalities. You don't have the medication if that's something that avenue you want to go down. And you're stuck feeling like this is all a character flaw in me.
Correct.
This is something that I clearly can't get a grip on. Everyone else has it figured out, but why can't I? Why can't I show up to work on time or school? Why can't I organize my papers? Why does my room and my desk look like a mess? And why do I constantly not have the ability to be able to control, you know, my emotions or my head or quiet it down? And like after a while, you really, like you said, start to develop this negative perception of yourself. And predominantly we are speaking on I mean, I would say people who are mainly go undiagnosed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because once you do get the tools and the modalities you need, you start to recognize and understand the condition more.
Yes, but even still, you're 100% correct. But even as a child, like I have a lot of 6, 7, 8, and 9-year-olds that don't have the ability of self-sufficiency and self-regulation yet. So even though they know that something is there, it's still hard,
of course,
to give them the modalities and to get them to be able to be consciously aware of when these things are happening in the moment.
Yes. And that just comes with developmental,
of course, no, of course,
age
in time,
and time. But yeah, what we're really talking about here is people who go undiagnosed, who don't really know or understand. And also people who are diagnosed, because I will say right now, I'm still extremely hard on myself. I also just got diagnosed 3 years ago, though.
Did you?
I'm 27. I was 24 years old when I got diagnosed. So I sat there for 24 years of my life developing this perception and negative thought process of myself, this self-blame, this critiquing, me looking inwards, feeling guilty and shameful and not understanding what was wrong with me. So although in the grand scheme of things, yes, I'm aware and I'm diagnosed and, I'm medicated now, and we'll talk about that too, it still is hard to unravel so many years
of conditioned thought relationships that you've developed internally. That's hard.
And most women don't get diagnosed until their 20s or older. Like you said, you had someone who was diagnosed in how old were they? The woman?
She was 48.
48
years old. And I've had people that just got diagnosed at 55.
Yep.
So that's 55 years.
Yeah.
That's double your age.
Yeah.
Of going through these thought patterns, these thought relationships, these preconceived notions, these feelings of feeling inadequate and insecure. That's years of untanglement that they have to go through in order to finally unravel what was actually going on inside of them. It's hard to break those thought processes.
It's really challenging. And, with ADHD, what I find is interesting, and again, it's very unique to everyone's experience, but for me, what's helped me is being able to have a structure of organization. I can keep organization and structure if it's implemented for me. I just can't create it myself.
Still?
No.
Okay.
So I've learned that I'm better. Okay. I don't want to say I can't at all, but what happens with me, which I think a lot of people can relate to, is I will look at a task or something that I need to get done, and I look at it as a whole, because my initiation, my sequencing, and my execution all seem like one. It's like 30 tabs in a computer are open, and I don't know which one was open first.
This is where my executive function thing wants to come in right now and just start
No, and let me, and you can totally can. So, it's like having so much noise in your head of, oh my gosh, I have to get this whole entire paper done or project or assignment. But you look at it as 50 steps as opposed to 4.
So you're constantly on the zoom out mode rather than zooming in.
Zoom in. And what I've noticed has been working for me is when I have that structure implemented and when I learn certain organization tactics, I'm able to then really thrive and flourish through that. And my brain is almost at like a common peace with that organization. But it's just learning through other people and having it modeled for me. And, people in my life have really helped me along with, my, how do I say this? Along with kind of the treatments that I've had and, just therapy and medicine and all of that has allowed for me to see, okay, so this doesn't really work organizing, but something so simple. I'm thinking of my clothes. So a while back, I didn't know the Komodo. Is that what it is? The Komodo method? Or
I have no idea
the Japanese folding
about.
method.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So basically, this folding method, what it does is it allows for you to have more space within your drawer. So you fold it a certain way to optimize on the amount of room that you have, as opposed to just like folding, stacking. So I've learned that the way that I used to do it, just like traditional, fold, put it in, layer on top, wasn't working for me. Everything would kind of like be all in disarray. It would be unorganized. So I've learned this method of how to maximize on my space while also learning the benefits of color coding. And
I love color coding.
Yeah, and kind of having certain draws be distinctive for certain fabrics or what you wear. So having, my leggings, my workout sets all in one. Having, regular t-shirts, things that I wear more frequently in another. So something as simple as that was a challenge for me. The last 3 years, I've had models for me and shown how to do it in a way that's structured and organized. So now I have all of my drawers. Everything is like all neat. It's all color coded. It's all folded where I could see everything. And now my brain's like at peace. I know where everything is.
So like, let me ask you
Nothing
this.
goes missing.
As a coach, the way that I would approach this is by breaking it down into super small, simple, trivial, menial tasks.
Yes.
Like start with half a drawer one day.
Yeah.
Right? So I kind of want to know, how did you go about starting this then? Because I think that's super important, because you have a lot of people listening to this that I would assume whose rooms are in disarray, whose cars are in disarray.
Or desk. Yeah, work desk. Yeah.
All right. Where everything is just an absolute fundamental chaotic mess in their life. And looking at it, task initiation, they don't know where to begin.
Right.
And now it's eliciting all of this anxiety. So again, as a coach, there are things that I would offer, but I'm super curious like how you began the color coding or doing the draws, and how now easy it is for you to remain consistent within that model.
Ooh. So I had this modeled for me from people in my life.
Yeah.
And then also I would look online for videos to see how to simply do it step by step. So like you said, I took it day by day where I would break it down into smaller steps. At first, it seemed like an overwhelming task for me that I would not be able to complete it.
Right.
However, through having suggestions from other people when I would ask, along with watching videos or looking up kind of what the steps would be and breaking it down and going, okay, step 1, Monday, I'm just going to refold all of the clothes in drawer 1.
Perfect.
Tuesday, in drawer 1 with the folded clothes, I will now just color code them.
Perfect.
Day 3, now I'm on drawer 2. Repeat that.
Did you offer yourself any reward systems for doing this?
No, because what was interesting is I was getting very...
You were getting a bit of a
I was
dopaminergic
getting
reward
a
mentally from it.
dopamine. I was getting motivation because at this point in my life, Ian, I was in such disarray and had so much overwhelming anxiety and felt like nothing in my life was going right. Everything and anything that could go wrong, I felt like was going wrong. I didn't feel like I was succeeding in life. I felt like everything was a mess. I could never get to anything on time. I was completely disorganized. I was unable to execute a task. And I needed something that was going to ground me. And I didn't have anything at that time. So when I started to take initiative and, do something as simple as organizing my room with my clothes, this was giving me that dopamine hit because I was finally getting structure and organization.
It was also giving you a sense of control when everything outside of your life has been so out of control. So it was one of the very few things that you could actually control within that moment.
Exactly. And it really felt so good to be able to have everything in order and know where it was and be able to not have to run around rampant. Like, where did I leave that tank top that I need to wear today? And I have work in 10 minutes. And now it's like, oh, the tank top's in that drawer. So even if I have 10 minutes, I know exactly where it is. It eliminates the anxiety, the conditioned feeling that I had for years on end because I didn't know what was wrong with me. I did not have these tools. So now implementing it has been a game changer.
Right.
Even with work. Kind of breaking everything down. I just recently, so I originally, and I'm sure many can relate to this, my Google Drive was like a mess. Like none of it was in folders. None of it was organized. I had no idea where anything was. And I was like, I don't even know how to get back to like my references or notes that I need for, certain treatments or certain things that I wanted to look into. 2 years back, one of my classes I had, I saw that they had broken down their Google Drive into all different labeled folders.
Love that.
This is something so simple that I literally could not even think of and didn't even know. So I looked at that and I was like, wow, wait, that would really help me. So it took me like 2 years, but now my Google Drive, I have everything labeled, like emotional regulation worksheets, CBT references, counseling notes. And even within my counseling notes folder, I have my clients in an individual folders of that. Yep. And I literally am like, wow, this is a game changer. So all of these little habits that I've transformed have really made for me to thrive in the place that is chaos.
Right.
And I want to say, with all of this negative being discussed, that there is so much positive with ADHD in terms of our spontaneity. The creativity that comes from ADHD is spectacular. I mean, I will think of these very elaborate kind of ideas that are very out of the box thinking, that aren't really what typical people would really think of, at that time.
100%.
You're very talkative, right? You're personable, high energy. So there's so many different components that make for ADHD amazing. That's like so many entrepreneurs and artists
have ADHD, or musicians, artists, athletes, because it's the ability to hyperfocus. And like for me, I look at ADHD like an absolute gift. Gift from God. Because again, you could look at ADHD and be like, okay, well, you have the impulsivity. Well, what's on the other side of impulsivity? Mm-hmm. Creativity.
Right.
Some of my best creations of my artwork in life have been through impulsive decisions.
Right.
Then you also have the high risk taking. When I lost my job over the summer and I decided to go into what I'm doing now, and I started my own business and got affiliated with another one, that was a leap of faith of completely impulsive high risk.
Right.
That was my ADHD just saying, go do it. So there's always the positive way, like having that cognitive shift as to how to look at this deficit as an actual gift. And it comes with so many different abilities that I think once people tap in and they hone them properly, you are able to accomplish so much more, because people with ADHD, phenomenal at pattern recognition. They are phenomenal. If you can gamify their life and turn it into a game, they will be able to accomplish a task infinitely quicker than anyone without ADD or ADHD. Right. They will soar through it tenfold. And that just goes to show you, as long as there is an ability to see and understand that at the end of the task, there's a tangible and feasible dopaminergic reward, even if it's mundane, even if the task is mundane, but you gamify it for us, we will slaughter that task.
Yeah.
And it's so important that people know that, because once you utilize this gift and you hone the unique capabilities that innately belong to you, there is absolutely no stopping you.
And that's what comes with recognizing what ADHD is, right? And what are the warning signs of it? And where's the line between, am I really struggling, or, is this laziness? And I wanted to tap into that of, many people will feel that since we can hyper focus, that we're lazy and it's just us not wanting to engage in the task.
Correct.
When that's the furthest thing from true. And everything we're talking about too, any typical person deals with this as well to some degree.
Well, that's why there's no behavioral issues with that just solely belong to ADHD. Right. I know many people that dealt with anxiety, that dealt with hyperness, that dealt with this and dealt with that and dealt with impulsivity. Yep. We just have it to an exasperated degree.
Where it impacts the day-to-day, where it is so dreadful, and the inability is like you're stuck in the mud. So that's really the difference, where people who are typical are able to really get out of that, I really don't want to do this, it's mundane, and just kind of focus for that time being and have that discipline. Whereas for people with ADHD, it really is such a challenge that it brings on so many different negatives to it. But, many people will say, or parents, oh, well, this just sounds like laziness. This just sounds like an excuse. Now, from the outside looking in, yes, okay, it can look like an excuse, right? However, the difference between ADHD and laziness is ADHD genuinely wants to get the task done.
That's so important to get across.
They want to read that book, write that paper, organize their room. They block out time to do it. However, they have so much noise in their mind and distractibility and inability to remain focused and not know where to start and task paralysis that no matter how hard they try, they'll sit there for 8 hours and end up doing something else and feel really shameful and guilty about it. Laziness is, I really don't want to do that right now.
Correct.
And they don't care. There's no negative thought or effect after.
Correct.
They're just like, doesn't really matter to me. I'm good. I'll get to it when I get to it. Laziness, there's a severe sense of self-guilt, shame, and there's this constant feedback loop. So, whereas hyper-focus can be and is a part of us, that does not mean that we don't want to initiate and start mundane and repetitive tasks that we have to do for our day-to-day. It's a challenge. It really is. And, there's a lot of modalities that work. Once it's recognized, I think people can find, like you're saying, there's so many wonders to it.
Oh my God, yeah.
And in adults specifically, just for us to kind of narrow down what you would see. So chronically disorganized.
Beyond.
Right? Missing deadlines often. Struggling to start a task, even if you genuinely want to.
Wait, can I tap in very quickly?
Yeah, you could bounce off me.
Also, struggling to finish tasks that you start and jumping from task to task to task.
And just to piggyback off that, when we were talking before about growing up, like you were doing Legos before we did
I was a
this
Lego
episode.
champ,
Yeah.
dog. I was a Lego champ.
Yeah. One thing that really stood out to me was growing up, I was in, my parents probably put me in every single sport: dance, gymnastics, soccer, clarinet, whatever the case may be. I quit every single one. I was in dance up until I had the dance recital. It was boring to me and I was like, I'm good. So it's wanting to be a part of something, wanting to do and finish a task, an event, be in a sport, but not being able to have that long-term motivation to stick with it.
But it's also, that's the thing, right? It's that initial dopamine hit of I want to do this, I want to do this. And then once the dopamine wears off, the norepinephrine is no longer there to keep you sustained and attentive in that.
Yeah. So that was one thing I've noticed in my life where I constantly was quitting everything. I could not sustain that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Nothing was exciting for me. And I was always at such a young age trying to seek that novelty. And that's something that, if you find when you were younger that relates to you, that is a sign too. And also being forgetful. Are you like forgetting people's birthdays? Are you forgetting meetings? Are you forgetting something that you have to do the next day? Are you walking into a room, going to get your keys, completely forgetting why you're in that room, going to a different task, and then 5 hours later remembering you walked into that room for your keys, right? So are you overwhelmed by daily routines? Do you have this emotional reactivity where you're quickly and easily frustrated? And most of the time, this isn't quickly and easily frustrated like when you find, because certain mood disorders where it's this low, constant mood, where you're irritable.
No, this
it's going to be in the moment.
Yeah, this is explosive and implosive simultaneously.
Impulsive, yes. Yeah, so all of these different things, I don't know if you want to add, are how they manifest in adulthood and how you could really start to question, is this maybe something that sounds relatable?
Well, I also think something that we didn't tap into in men specifically. There seems to be more of a disobedience that takes place.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we go over something which does not always go hand in hand with ADHD, but ODD, which is the oppositional defiance disorder. And I've noticed in men, especially within my older male clients that go unchecked for so long, a lot of this reactivity in a defiant manner to where it almost becomes almost volatile and visceral.
Right, into contact disorder.
Yes. So I think that's also something that I've definitely seen, something that I've been doing a lot of work with young men is this can manifest, not always, this can manifest into this visceral reactivity of where it's not just that explosivity, it becomes almost volatile to a point around your surroundings where it's almost dangerous in a sense, and where I've seen people elicit fear amongst their peers in doing so. So I don't know. I haven't met many women with ODD. Okay, most of it for me.
Primarily, most of it. There are, of course, kids.
I'm sure.
Women as well.
Most of it for me.
But ODD would be more, you're talking about teenagers and children, right? Because once you pass
yet
15,
more 15,
14,
16. 15,
okay,
16.
so that's conduct
yes.
disorder.
So, correct. So that's something that I've definitely noticed can manifest into their older years.
It could be co-occurring. Conduct disorder is really difficult, though, and complex.
In order to diagnose as they get older, I understand.
Not just that, just to understand where it derives from, because there's a lot of different research and components to back
different
it.
Different traumas and different things that people go through. Understandable.
I think what you hit earlier was really the main point for what you're saying now is just being conditioned, right? So if you're
100%.
conditioned around you and you're this boy who was very impulsive, hyperactive, but you were always scolded, you're going to learn, that this is just a negative attribute to yourself.
You have to repress your emotions,
and then it comes out in this anger management and
correct.
all of this.
Or it does also come out, like we said, within that RSD, which is where now a lot of these young, like myself, so I had the equal component of being reactive, but also people-pleasing at the same time. So I was taught to repress my emotions. And then what wound up happening is I developed the RSD where I was super sensitive to everything also. Every single time I got micro-corrected, contradicted, it literally felt like someone ripped my insides out.
Right.
So that's definitely something when it comes to that overreactivity and that sensory processing that I think also happens more often than not when a young child is taught to repress their emotions and not engage in them.
A lot of times too, though, people with ADHD, they're very empathetic. And think about it. If your
100%.
prefrontal cortex is kind of lower and you don't really have it functioning as high as others, your brain is really tapping into that like emotional limbic system.
Yeah, but what about also with their amygdala, okay? Because you spoke about the amygdala hijack in one of our previous episodes. People with ADHD have a 40% higher cortisol spike than the average human being. So their amygdala, I don't want to use the word gets hijacked, but it's quite active when they go into that fight, flight, and freeze mode, which is what winds up shutting off that prefrontal cortex.
Well, and that's why they have this emotional reactivity that many people don't understand is a huge component to ADHD, emotional dysregulation, because if your prefrontal cortex already isn't operating to the degree it should be, now imagine if you're in this heightened state. So it's already now lowered to a substantial degree. And what does the prefrontal cortex do? It
processing information controls. That's your
processes
impulsivity
your
control.
Emotions. So of course this impulsivity is going to be seen at a higher degree. Of course you're going to be more emotionally sensitive and, heightened and hypervigilant. And there's so many different things that come along with this emotionally.
Correct.
That I don't think people realize.
No, not at all. They only think that this is a disorder where people are hyperactive, where they
fidgeting,
are fidgeting, twitching around, constantly interrupting. Which, by the way, something which I think is super important to tell people, dopamine is also highly important for body function.
Yeah.
So your dopamine in your system, you will notice a lot of individuals with ADHD tend to be a little quirky with their body movements because it's low dopamine.
Oh, me. Oh, yeah. Have you seen me run?
Yeah. She needs a helmet. She needs
My feet are flailing. I'm just like, I don't know what. 100%.
But that's what I'm saying, So that's also very important to get across is a lot of people tend to make fun of the body mechanics of these quirky individuals with ADHD because they walk weird or their body kind of moves in a weird way. And it really is low dopamine that's causing a lot of these issues to manifest physically.
Yeah. And sometimes, which we won't get into today, but ADHD and autism can, be misdiagnosed.
Beyond.
Or it could be comorbid. So there's like a bunch of different stuff with that, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah, but like
that's
everyone's a little autistic nowadays. Like everyone's on the spectrum. I'm on the spectrum.
Love
You're on
on
the
the
spectrum.
spectrum.
My favorite. I got my dad to watch it. My dad and I just watched all 3 seasons together.
Best show.
Tanner and Connor, if you guys see this, my boys. Okay? I love that show. I've never rooted for people more in my life, and it's made me realize how alone in life I truly am.
Yeah. Wait, who is the man who had the party hat who, when his mom was giving a speech, it was all over the internet. His mom was giving a speech. It was his birthday, and she was like, "Oh, happy birthday." And then he like paused her and he was like, "Are you going to be done now? Can you stop talking?"
I have no idea.
Oh my God, that is the funniest
no
skit
idea.
that I have seen. That had me cracking up last year. Best show.
It's the best show. But again, like we're all a little bit autistic now. Like apparently the spectrum is so wide that if you fart the wrong way, you're falling on the spectrum. So like, it's just, I've given up on that. So yes, you can misdiagnose ADHD and autism. I've seen it done quite frequently. And now you have all these different brain institutes out there that are doing these tests where people are paying $10,000 and everyone's getting diagnosed with mild autism now. Ridiculous.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, I have.
Well, I not to get on the autism topic, but I do think that autism is more prevalent now just because there's less of a stigma around it. There's more information on it, and people are now coming to understand the categories of.
I feel like I want to contradict this, but I don't know if it's appropriate for me to.
Listen, you
this.
could have your own opinion.
I feel
just
that
see it in the
autism is done
clinical.
based off of vaccines. I'm just gonna say it.
No, oh my gosh, that is not true.
That's just it's. I feel that it's based off of vaccines, and I also in the spike of it, and I feel that it's because in the last 30 to 40 years, the ultra processed garbage that go into our foods that were not in there 100 years ago has absolutely contributed to this. That is my own opinion.
Vaccines do not create autism. They do not.
Where did peanut allergies come from? No one had that when you were a kid, Jay. Okay, they didn't exist. You had 1 in maybe 10,000. Egg allergies. Everyone now is gluten intolerant. I'm not going to get into this because I'm getting excited. So I'm gonna simmer this down.
Yeah, back to ADHD. Also, vaccines do not cause autism. I'm just gonna say that again, just for the people.
Okay.
But yes, so there are many different areas of ADHD that can produce significant struggle, but also, like we said, there's so many great qualities that come from this condition, disorder. And the sooner that you're able to identify and recognize it, the better you'll be able to have those modalities and the ability to be able to take charge of your life. And I truly do believe that even though you have any condition, any mental health disorder, the habits that you form can completely rechange and alter the trajectory of the rest of your life. And it's not a label, and you don't. It's not an identity, right? So it's just understanding that, just like I need glasses to see, sometimes I need medication or certain modalities to be able to help me with my ADHD to function better.
I think that's super important, as you said, something that it's not an identity, and I think a lot of people wind up creating an identity out of having ADHD.
Yeah,
and creating this false sense of crutch that they need to lean on, and that's why they have all of these issues. And branching off of what you said, I think the more that people develop these modalities, the more that people develop these self-soothing and self-resilient techniques, I also believe that the more that they're able to self-acknowledge their accomplishments throughout the day. So one thing that I have a lot of my clients do, every single one of them has to buy a pocket journal. It's non-negotiable.
Oh, cute.
So they walk around with pocket journals all day, and they will write down all of their accomplishments. And I tell them your accomplishments are only as big as you make them out to be.
Right.
It could be waking up on time. It could also be holding the door open for somebody, and it could be completing the task or setting an intent or finishing the homework. And the more stacked achievements that you have throughout the day that you wind up weighing at the end of the week, it builds that sense of inner resilience and fosters that inner sense of care, which I think is super important for individuals with ADHD.
Which leads to the dopamine hit.
That's right.
And really quickly, I mean, let's talk on some of the modalities and ways that can help. And, you know, I said earlier, medication is not the route for everyone. And, you know, it's individualized to how you feel, the person. But medication within ADHD is highly researched. It's actually stimulants are one of the most highly researched pediatric medication on this market. And there's over 60 years plus of research. And a lot of it says, you know, that we're finding 70% of children who get the help that they need at a young age with stimulants and the behavioral techniques have a much better, you know, outlook and trajectory on being able to foster a different sense of habits, better learning, better ability to be able to execute all of these difficulties that they're facing. So, you know, medication completely changed my life. You know, when I got on it, it really silenced the noise in my head. It allowed for me to focus. It gave me that dopamine to be able to keep going. And something I want to say about medication, because I find there's a lot right now online about it. Stimulant medication, yes. Does it change neurochemistry? Of course, but not in a scary way. And what it does is people with ADHD already have a lower amount of dopamine and norepinephrine in their brain. So all this does is bring you back to baseline that a person who is functioning at, you know, a typical level would be at, and it doesn't produce more artificial dopamine. It just releases and recycles. It releases the dopamine, natural dopamine. That you have. But again, there's non-stimulants. There's also stimulants. For me, stimulants and behavioral techniques was the way to go. That is what served me best. That is what I feel completely saved my life in this whole, you know, catastrophic situation that I thought was going to be never ending. And there's other ways too. You could just do behavioral, you could do cognitive behavioral therapy, you could do habit stacking, you could see an executive function coach along with medication or a psychologist.
Everything serves a purpose for a very specific individual. There's medication for those that help, like yourself, and then at times it's almost like adding gasoline to a fire. All depending on the type of individual. And again, like I did a seminar the other week. I think medication is super necessary. I think that there is a overindulgence of medication now. And that's prescribed where you have these young children on a plethora of different medications that are 8 and 9. That's on 6 different medications from antipsychotics, antidepressants, anti-anxiety, ADHD, and all these different things, which ultimately it just serves no purpose after a while, and it's doing more damage than good.
I agree with the multiple.
So that's all. But I definitely do believe, like you said, offering the different modalities, offering the medication to those who genuinely need it, and also trial and error. Some people just need a kickstart of medication. And then as they develop, like you said, going through CBT or doing an executive function coach, developing the certain skills in time, they might be able to wean themselves off of the medication. I've seen it happen numerous times. When I was younger, I was on medication up until high school, and then I came off, and I never went on it again. You know?
I also take it as needed. So I don't take it on the weekends. I don't take it when I'm not working. So I solely take it for the times where I know that I need to focus, have, you know, initiation, be able to sit and function to get my daily tasks done. And, you know, again, we're not here to like diagnose or be doctors. And if the first place to start would be like to go to your general practitioner and kind of, you know, discuss it there and see where they navigate you. They'll have many different suggestions. Go to your psychologist, your therapist. I don't know if as an executive functioning coach and within the practice that you work, do you guys have different recommendations for psychiatrists and things of that sort?
Oh, yeah. And I also, even in my own independent practice now, I've gotten very well acquainted with psychiatrists and things like that. So I'm able to push people off to different avenues and areas.
Right. And they're more equipped to be
way more equipped, yeah.
They're more equipped to be able to really talk about that medication component
100%.
and, your different avenues. And I think that when you have multiple different techniques that work for you, you could really thrive.
Absolutely.
And then, like we've said, just kind of learning to habit stack, build those methods.
Develop and foster that inner sense of resilience and self-sufficiency and self-love, and that ability to self-regulate and self-acknowledge is super important through those habit stacking and those commitments.
Right. And it's not going to come until you're knowledgeable on it, right?
Correct.
Like, you need to kind of pinpoint what's going on. And if, you feel like this is something that is relatable, and then from there really do the work to find out what it is and, go from there.
You also have to get comfortable being uncomfortable in this process, because
it's
when
hard.
you start these tasks and when you start actually doing the work of wanting to recognize and reconcile with this ADHD that has plagued you, it's going to come with a lot of roadblocks and a lot of obstacles. But the more obstacles that there are, it's also a lot more opportunity for growth. And as long as there is a perception switch as to how you perceive the things that you want to get through, I think that being able to achieve anything is more than feasible.
Oh my gosh, you could
take over the world
of a switch.
Yeah.
I have completely transformed with my habit stacking, with becoming self-aware, with being able to implement, different tools and strategies that work well. And my brain now is like on fire with, ideas, with creativity, with being able to really flourish where I know I feel comfortable and where it makes me feel good. And if I could get there with where I was at, I promise anyone else can. You just need the right tools and support.
And I want to say this, ending this episode, if anyone is struggling with ADHD and you just have questions, I think they should be more than welcome to reach out to us.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We can
ask
answer
us and bounce some ideas off of us, even if you're a parent struggling or you're a parent who has a child who's struggling.
Oh, yes.
I think we're both open to answering every and all questions, and we'll just be a soundboard for some advice on this.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Good job.